Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 6 Part 28 based on novel. So let's start. A deadly without equal force penetrated Foam Kang's chest as fresh blood wildly spurted out. Under countless shocked gazes, Foam Kang's body flew backwards before finally crashing into the ground, smashing through a dozen towering trees before slowly coming to a stop. Complete silence. Every gaze was locked onto the sorry figure, who's leaning back on a giant tree as he violently coughed out mouthful after mouthful of fresh blood. Foam Kang's aura was currently extremely weak. In their intense exchange, Lin Dong seemed to have emerged victorious. The silence lasted for a moment before finally being broken by a series of gasps. Gazes tinged with the flavor of fear once again looked towards the young figure in the sky. The young man stood in the air as fresh blood dripped from his body. As the wind blew past, the faint smell of blood spread out in the air. The two of them did not look overly at ease, but of course, after witnessing the previous intense battle earlier, no one dared to sneer at Lin Dong's current appearance. Their fight could only be described as totally stunning even for Mu Lin and the rest. They clearly understood that it was impossible for them to push the heavenly soul treasure-wielding Foam Kang to such a step. Thus, even though Lin Dong had obtained a hard-fought victory, he had already far surpassed them. Under everyone's stare, Lin Dong's figure gradually landed in front of the coughing Foam Kang. The former's eyes were cold and indifferent. "You win." Foam Kang wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth, his face deathly pale as he lifted his head and looked at Lin Dong. His voice was hoarse while his expression was one of defeat. Lin Dong eyed Foam Kang and smiled a little. He took 2 steps forward and gently patted the latter's shoulder as if they were extremely familiar with each other. At the same time, the rippling yuan power on the surface of his body quietly weakened. When Foam Kang saw Lin Dong approach, he was stunned for a moment. Soon after, he forced a smile as his hand moved a little. A sinister look suddenly flashed across his lowered eyes while a cold flash swept across his palm, before he viciously stabbing at Lin Dong's heart. Squelch! The muffled sound of a sharp weapon cutting flesh was heard. The cold flash in Foam Kang's hand abruptly froze half an inch to Lin Dong's throat, the former's mouth gaping as he stared at the still smiling face of the young man before him. The latter's fingers had already penetrated his throat like a sharp sword. "Since I am able to reach this stage of the competition, I am naturally not so naive," Lin Dong softly murmured as he watched Foam Kang with blood frantically gushing from his mouth, as his incomparably bitterly resentful eyes stared back. "The victor will obtain everything while the loser will lose everything. Since you've lost, you will have nothing. I know that if I was the one to lose, your methods would be 10 times more cruel than mine. However, it's a pity you don't have the chance to use them." Lin Dong stretched out his right fist. At the center of his palm was a resplendent silver Nirvana seal. He quickly grabbed Foam Kang's palm. Within his palm was a golden Nirvana seal. A heavenly level Nirvana seal. Lin Dong's palm gently touched it as the golden Nirvana seal in Foam Kang's hand faded at an alarming speed, while the Nirvana seal in Lin Dong's palm swiftly turned from silver to pure gold. Absorbing Foam Kang's Nirvana seal had evidently upgraded Lin Dong's Nirvana seal to the heavenly level. Foam Kang bitterly stared at Lin Dong as the latter absorbed his Nirvana seal, as if he wanted to say something. But the blood in his mouth had completely blocked his words. In the end, the life in his eyes swiftly started to fade, and with a final thump, his immobile body slowly fell to the ground, causing a small cloud of dust to rise. This super empire leader, whose name had once shook Wanxiang City, had now lost the qualifications to fight just as he had entered the core area, becoming one of the countless departed spirits of this land. Gulp! Mu Lin and the rest gazed at those indifferent eyes as the blood-soaked fingers were pulled out. Lin Dong's indifferent attitude had caused a faint chill to run up their spines. Evidently, they had never imagined that this normally gentle-looking fellow was actually so vicious when the time came for him to act. "Foam Kang's death is akin to crushing half of the Wind Cloud Empire," Mu Lin sighed. Even he felt a little regretful to personally witness a powerful empire fall to such a state. "I'm afraid it's more than just half," Mu Hanu's soft muttered, a complicated feeling in her voice. Upon hearing this, Mu Lin's expression abruptly changed. he immediately lifted his head to gaze at the forest a distance away. A berserk and cruel to the maximum aura had suddenly exploded from there. White tiger army shattering fist. A tiger's roar followed by a shout filled with endless killing intent sounded out. As they faded, the forest trembled violently. The crowd faintly saw an enormous white tiger appear as a berserk to the maximum fist force containing killing intent and desperation flew forth. Boom! The ground shook as that punch was executed and directly tore apart a 100-meter-wide ditch on the ground. At the same time, a soaring white tiger filled with endless ferocity and killing intent that was packed with every ounce of strength from Little Flame's body, solemnly slammed against that muscular figure, who could not dodge in time. Boom! A scalp-numbing noise sounded out. That muscular figure was immediately blown away as he manically vomited blood. Meanwhile, the golden glow shimmering on his body had completely dimmed. Finally, under the stares of the crowd, his body flew out before he finally slammed hideously against a large boulder. When the crowd saw that figure, whose upper body was covered by debris, all of their pupils violently shrunk. That was because they suddenly realized that the figure was Meng Lai from Wind Cloud Empire. However, right now, it seemed like that originally fearsome Meng Lai's body was twisted into a peculiar fashion. Boom! At the distant forest, a fearsome killing intent gushed forth. Following which, a massive figure dashed forth just like a wild prehistoric beast, before he solemnly landed in front of Meng Lai. Without hesitation, he immediately punched the latter's head viciously. Everyone's eyelids instantly jumped violently. Such a powerful and critical attack. Even if Meng Lai had 9 lives, he would still die. Meng Lai is finished. As the dust settled, that giant figure quickly shrunk before it transformed back into Little Flame's original body. Everyone could see that there were numerous hideous wounds plastered over his body. Even though he had eventually defeated Meng Lai, he had paid a heavy price as well. Nonetheless, regardless of how heavy the price he had, compared to Meng Lai who lost his life, he was evidently several times much better off. Under the stares from the crowd, Little Flame directly grabbed on Meng Lai's body. Following which, just like what Lin Dong did, he directly sucked his Nirvana seal into his palm. Immediately, the Nirvana seal in his palm turned golden. Bang! The crowds were stunned by this sight. At a distance away, another black figure was tossed until he eventually landed beside Meng Lai's corpse. As the crowds turned to look, they saw that heavily injured man was actually the final for Yuan Nirvana stage member of Wind Cloud member, Luo Tong. Compared to the Feng Keng duo, Luo Tong had evidently kept his life. However, the fear in his eyes was so profound that no one could fathom its depth. Nobody knew what terrifying object he had witnessed in his previous bout with Little Martin. Boom! 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 After Luo Tong was tossed out, 5 more figures were flung hideously towards him. At a distance away, Su Ru floated over with green glow surrounding her body, releasing extremely powerful vibrations. Based on this sight, it seems like the 5-3 Yuan Nirvana stage practitioners from Wind Cloud Empire have been handled by her alone. Good job, Little Ru. When he saw this sight, a tinge of shock flashed across Lin Dong's eyes. Promptly, he raised his thumbs at Su Ru. The green glow surrounding Su Ru quickly disappeared. When she saw Lin Dong praising her, her face gently reddened. Promptly, she asked worryingly, "Big brother Lin Dong, your injuries?" "No worries." Lin Dong smiled as he shook his head. "Huh, still a close fight. You guys were actually forced into such a sorry state." Little Martin's figure leisurely walked over from a distance away. When he saw Lin Dong and Little Flame covered in blood, his eyes scanned across their bodies before he teased them sadistically. "We got into a rather sorry state. However, it was truly satisfying." Lin Dong smiled and he did not elaborate. Feng Kang and Meng Lai were indeed powerful individuals. Since they entered into the ancient battlefield, they have encountered several opponents. However, this is the first time that they had such a close fight. Nonetheless, the Wind Cloud Empire is over, Little Martin gently smiled as he said. "Indeed they are." This phrase immediately popped up in the minds of everyone in the crowds. As their attention turned towards them, most of them deeply exhaled, as if they were trying to exhale the shock in their hearts. The two leaders of Wind Cloud Empire had died right here. Evidently, their super empire will fall as well. They were perhaps the first super empire to have been eliminated after entering the core region. Furthermore, the ones who accomplished such a feat were a group of men who came from a low-ranked empire. If news of this matter spread out, it would shock the entire core region. Truly to make one's name in a single battle. The fierce and uncontrollable energy ripple that had spread throughout the sky quietly scattered at this moment. However, silence remained in the air as far as the eye could see. No one from even the super empires dared to make any noise as everyone's hearts were currently filled with shock. This world is going to change. The Leho Empire's Mo Fen finally regained his senses a moment later. He felt some lingering fear as he gazed at the two icy-cold corpses while attempting to utter a joke to calm his heart a little. The Lin Dawn trio, they are from a low-rank empire. The following words from Mo Fen were basically inaudible and faintly contained a bitter feeling. As someone from a super empire, he would inevitably feel superior when facing the competitors from low-rank, mid-rank and even high-rank empires. After all, they were easily able to accomplish feats that other people needed to put in a great amount of effort in order to achieve. Their starting point far exceeded the rest, and that allowed them to be able to take the lead in this 100-empire war in an extremely easy manner and tower over everyone else. Yet, at this moment, a low-rank empire, which he viewed to be as insignificant as an ant, had actually produced 3 troublesome or even monstrous individuals. The frightening divide between a low-rank empire and a super empire had been forcefully crossed by them at this moment. Wu Ta, looks like your eyes are extremely terrible. Mu Lin turned his head at this moment and glanced at the rigid face of Wu Ta as he mocked with a smile. Originally, Wu Ta had planned to join forces with the Wind Cloud Empire. Amidst this, it was possible that Wu Ta harbored some ill thoughts towards them. However, now that the Wind Cloud Empire had been destroyed by Lin Dong's hands, Wu Ta's intention to join forces was also shattered. That 10 million Nirvana pills that you have loaned out, looks like it has all come to naught. Mo Fen laughed out loud. His voice was clearly a gloating one. Ha ha, what are the two you talking about? Wu Ta's expression was unsightly as he let out a dry laughter. His eyes watched Lin Dong's group with some fear. However, his heart involuntarily cursed. He was not cursing Lin Dong's group, instead, he was cursing that useless Feng Kang. A super empire which possessed 3-4 Yuan Nirvana stage experts had actually been finished off the moment they entered the core region. This was truly a disgrace. Although he cursed in his heart, he clearly understood that if it were his forest empire instead, the speed at which they would be crushed would be even swifter. The combat strength that Lin Dong's group displayed had already surpassed that of his forest empire. In his opinion, it was likely that only those existences which were ranked amongst the top super empires would be able to deal with Lin Dong's group. With regards to the large amount of Nirvana pills that he had loaned to the Wind Cloud Empire, he could only clench his teeth and bitterly swallow down the grudge right now. The other party was already dead, who would he look for to repay him? Although he coveted the heavenly soul treasure that had fallen into Lin Dong's hands, he was clearly not foolish enough to stupidly attempt to demand that soul treasure from Lin Dong after having witnessed the fate of Feng Kang's group. Useless swindlers? Wu Ta looked at the sky in a speechless manner. His heart was aching, but all he could do was to curse furiously in his heart. Lin Dong ignored the countless number of gazes that contained thick respect from around him as he directly sat on the ground. The intense pain that spread all over his body caused him to part his mouth. This fight could be considered to be the most intense one since Lin Dong had entered the ancient battlefield. It must be said that Feng Kang was indeed extremely strong. Not to mention the heavenly soul treasure he wielded. Even though Lin Dong had quite a number of trump cards, he had still been forced into such a situation. Although it had been a bitter battle, so much so that Lin Dong had even unleashed the heavenly dragon aura hidden within his dantian towards the end and ended up suffering serious injuries. However, he was able to sense that after his body had been pushed beyond its limits, he was now better able to adapt to the heavenly dragon aura. This would be very useful in helping him to master Green Heaven materialized dragon skill. It was obvious that the potential of one's body would increase after experiencing this kind of fight that pushed one to one's limits. Little Martin squatted by the side. His hand also contained a golden Nirvana seal, as Luo Tong clearly possessed the qualification to own a heavenly grade Nirvana seal after having advanced to the 4 Yuan Nirvana stage. Now that this Nirvana seal was absorbed by Little Martin, it had clearly allowed the latter's Nirvana seal rise in rank. Big brother Lin Dong, our Nirvana seals have also changed quite a bit. To one side, Su Ru and Su Kuei also extended their hands. Their palms had a shiny silver Nirvana seal. Moreover, the Nirvana seal seemed to contain a trace of gold. The 5 Yuan Nirvana stage experts, who had been defeated by them earlier, all possessed an Earth-grade Nirvana seals. Moreover, they were all ranked near the top. Now, their Nirvana seals had been divided between Su Ru and Su Kuei. Although the two of them did not leap to the heavenly grade Nirvana seal, their progress was still rather good. Ha ha, I have ridden on the coattails of Little Ru. Su Kuei laughed. He knew that with his own strength, dealing with any one of the 5 from before was his limit. If he fought the 5 of them alone, he would definitely end up losing. Snatching the other party's Nirvana seal was something that he did not even need to think of. Looks like we had a rather bountiful harvest. Lin Dong grinned a little. He unceremoniously extended his hand and took the Qiankun bags from the corpses of Feng Kang and Meng Lai before stuffing both of them into his sleeves. If he did not gain any battle spoils after such an intense battle, he would really be letting himself down. Ha ha, congratulations brother Lin Dong. Currently, the Wind Cloud Empire merely exists in name. It will not be long before brother Lin Dong's name will spread across the entire core region, and it is likely that you will even gradually be watched by those super sects. A short distance away, Mu Lin and the rest drifted over as they cupped their hands together towards Lin Dong and said. Behind Mu Lin, Mo Fen from the Lehua Empire and Wu Ta from the Forest Empire also followed. The 3 super empires were all gathered together, an extremely eye-catching sight. If my reputation spreads, I'm afraid that I will only end up attracting even more trouble. Lin Dong laughed. His gaze calmly drifted over Wu Ta. The latter shrunk his neck under this gaze from Lin Dong while his face was filled with an awkward smile. Although Lin Dong and Little Flame currently looked as though they were covered in wounds and were not in good condition, Wu Ta did not dare to slight these two even a little. Moreover, beside the two of them was a smiling Little Martin, who had managed to subdue the 4 Yuan Nirvana stage Luo Tong without even a single wound on his body. Wu Ta knew that amongst these 3, the one who appeared to be the most handsome young man was the who had concealed himself the deepest. Wu Ta involuntarily felt as though he wanted to cry and smile the moment he thought of this. Just what kind of monsters were these? Each of them was even more monstrous than the other. With the strength of brother Lin Dong's group, it is likely that only the super empires who are ranked close to the top have the qualification to fight with you. It seems that the Nirvana Golden ranking of this 100 Empire War will definitely have places for the 3 of you. Mu Lin laughed. The friendliness within his voice could not be hidden. Lin Dong merely smiled in the face of this flattery from Mu Lin. The core region had at least 10 cities that were similar to a great city like the Wanxiang city, and in comparison, those great cities were only stronger than the Wanxiang city, hence the competition would be even more intense. Although Lin Dong's group had defeated the Wind Cloud Empire, it was a little overboard to say that they could roam unhindered throughout the entire core region. Mu Lin had clearly saw the perfunctory manner of Lin Dong and his caution. Immediately, he ceased talking about this matter. He knew that he did not Lin Dong any substantial help in his fight with the Wind Cloud Empire since the beginning. Now that Lin Dong had succeeded, his attempt to show his goodwill would have difficulty gaining much effect. Moreover, they were currently in the core region and were all considered competitors. Each of them were eyeing the Nirvana seal in each other's hands in order to be able to ascend the Nirvana Golden ranking. Therefore, it was clearly impossible for them to get Lin Dong, who was not in a good condition, to reveal too much warmth to them. Ha ha, now that the 100 Empire War has begun. Brother Lin Dong should quickly recuperate from your injuries. My Lone Moon Empire also plans to get moving. Hopefully, Brother Lin Dong will show mercy the next time we meet. Mu Lin joked with a smile. It must be said that this Mu Lin was indeed something. At this moment, he was actually able to relax and joke with Lin Dong. This caused Lin Dong to regard him from a new light. What is Brother Mu saying? I will not offend others if they don't offend me. If the Wind Cloud Empire did not view me as a thorn in their side, I would not have planned on crossing blows with them. Lin Dong said. Mu Lin smiled upon hearing this. After which, he cupped his hands towards Lin Dong before leading Mu Hanyu and the rest to leave in a free and easy fashion. Mu Hanyu's pretty eyes involuntarily paused for an instant on Lin Dong's body. The latter did not appear tall or mighty, and his battered and bloody body even caused him to appear a little miserable. However, his appearance made Mu Hanyu gently bite her red lips. She hesitated for a moment before removing out a jade bottle from her sleeves. A gentleness that was a little different from her cold self was revealed before Lin Dong. This should be of some help to your injuries. If you think that I am purposefully trying to get into your good books, you can toss it aside after I leave. Under Lin Dong's astonished gaze, Mu Hanyu spoke out in an indifferent manner before turning around. The figure molded by her snow-white clothes drew out the desire in the surrounding gazes. Phut, the Ice Queen is finally touched. Little Martin curled his mouth and laughed in a strange manner. Lin Dong helplessly shook his head. With a flip of his hand, he stored the jade bottle in his sleeves. After which, he also stood up and softly said, "There are many eyes here. Let us leave first. The heavenly grade Nirvana seals in our hands are very alluring to the eyes of others." Lin Dong turned around and headed in another direction after uttering those words as little Martin and the rest swiftly followed. Finally, they disappeared into the wild forest amidst many eyes that had not seen enough of the show. The curtain of the 100 Empire War appeared to have been formally opened the moment Lin Dong's group stepped into this region. From between the foliage of the towering trees, speckles of scarlet sunlight sprinkled through, giving the huge and boundless forest a somber and desolate atmosphere. In the core zone, it seemed as if even the sunlight concealed traces of chilly-killing intent. Countless heroes had fallen on this vast land. Currently, there were a few figures quietly seated on a plot of empty land in the depths of the forest. A faint bloody smell drifted out from their bodies, informing others that they had just experienced a great battle. Upon closer inspection, the figures gradually became familiar. They belonged to Lin Dong and his counterparts, who had just gone through a great battle with the Wind Cloud Empire half a day earlier. Due to the battle, Lin Dong and Little Flame had sustained some injuries. In a land that was filled with danger, an injury was a danger in itself. Therefore, after the battle ended, Lin Dong did not stop at any highly populated places and retreated with his counterparts. Even though he believed that he had instilled fear in people's hearts by defeating the Wind Cloud Empire, there were still people who would let greed overwhelm their rationality in this world. Currently, they possessed 3 heavenly grade Nirvana seals which were undeniably enticing for those who wanted to break into the Nirvana Golden ranking. In addition, Lin Dong had seized the Black Dragon Sky Roaring seal from Fongkeng under everyone's watchful eyes. Undoubtedly, this would only increase the greed in some people's hearts. Thus, in order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Lin Dong chose to retreat for the time being and keep a low profile after his ground-shaking battle. He understood that this news would spread to more than half of the core zone within a day or two. By then, he would have attracted the attention of many powerful and ambitious individuals. Nonetheless, no matter how troublesome it was, he had to treat his injuries first. Everyone had become lions trapped in a cage once they entered the core zone. The only way to rise above others was to step over one another and move forward. There was no compassion, only the strong and the weak. Lin Dong sat in silence under a huge tree. He had already changed out of his blood-stained clothes. However, the faint smell of blood had yet to dissipate completely and there were still some open wounds on his body. These kinds of injuries would take an ordinary person a few days to recover. However, Lin Dong's body was different from others. Not only was his body physically stronger, but after practicing the Green Heaven materialized dragon skill, his recovery capabilities were now countless times stronger than an ordinary practitioner as well. Therefore, most of his wounds had healed in a mere half a day. As for the Yuan power that had been depleted, it was recovering at a terrifying rate thanks to his devouring ancestral symbol. Given his abnormal recovery rate, he would soon be lively and regain his fighting strength in a day. While Lin Dong and Little Flame were in recovery mode, Little Martin was leaning against a huge rock and sunbathing in the scarlet sunshine that poured down from between the trees. He bit a piece of grass and appeared extremely carefree. However, even though he had a languid demeanor, he still opened his eyes slightly from time to time and scanned the depths of the forest with a piercing gaze. At this point of time, Lin Dong and Little Flame were in a relatively weak state. Clearly, all responsibility fell on Little Martin for the time being. Meanwhile, Su-Ru fiddled with the bonfire as she put up roast meat on the roasting rack, giving a rather busy appearance. However, this scene was somewhat heartwarming as well. Compared to the previous gruesome and bloody battle, this atmosphere was much more relaxing. Brother Lin Jiao, this place is far from the main roads and few would walk in this direction. This place should be quite safe. Tsukue grinned as he took a piece of meat from the roasting rack and passed it to Little Martin. In his eyes, this devilish handsome young man was enigmatic and unpredictable. Even though Lin Dong and Little Flame had certainly shocked him with their fighting capabilities, he still felt that the seemingly lazy Little Martin was the one who concealed himself the most out of the trio. With regards to the enormous mysterious power in Su-Ru's body, Lin Dong and Little Flame had no idea on how to deal with it. However, Little Martin actually had ways to help Su-Ru control it. It was hard to imagine that such a young man would possess this ability. Initially, Tsukue thought that only the super sects had the ability to solve the issue of the mysterious power in Su-Ru's body. However, it had already been solved by Little Martin. It's good to be careful. Lin Dong has a prudent nature. He will not allow the slightest bit of carelessness that will result in the situation growing out of control, Little Martin casually replied as he received the roast meat and viciously bit into it. Tsukue gave a silly laugh and could not help but glance at the recuperating Lin Dong. The former could tell that the trio shared a remarkable relationship. Among the three of them, it was apparent that Lin Dong was the core and the leader of the group. Even though there were times when the enigmatic Little Martin would guide Lin Dong on certain issues, he would still follow Lin Dong's decisions on the more important issues. Previously, Tsukue could not understand why was this so. However, after he witnessed the battle between Lin Dong and Feng Kang, he somewhat understood that this young and ordinary-looking fellow possessed some mystical abilities that could turn the impossible into the possible. Furthermore, from what I can see, I'm afraid our situation is not as pleasant as you think it is, Little Martin wiped his mouth and said. His enchanting purple-black eyes narrowed a little as a dark look flashed across them. Is there a problem? Upon hearing these words, Tsukue asked in a low voice as his facial expression slightly changed. Little Martin lightly nodded his head. He glanced at Lin Dong and Little Flame, who were both deep in a state of recovery as the corners of Little Martin's mouth curled to form a sinister smile. Back in the Wanxiang city, he had already sensed this well-hidden presence. Initially, Little Martin had believed that he was mistaken. However, after they had entered the core zone, this feeling grew even stronger. Clearly, they had been marked by someone. However, the person hiding in the dark was rather powerful. Even Lin Dong and Little Flame could not sense him. There are indeed a lot of capable individuals in the ancient battlefield, Little Martin sneered as he threw away the bone in his hand. Tsukue's facial expression grew somber and felt a faint sense of unease. This was the first time he had seen Little Martin show this kind of expression. Little Martin had never showed such an expression even when in the face of an individual like Feng Kang. Don't worry, if an unforeseen event arises later, you and Little Ru only need to protect Lin Dong and Little Flame. They are currently at a critical moment in their recovery. As long as they can endure through this, they will be able to regain their fighting capabilities, Little Flame instructed in an indifferent manner. Okay. Tsukue nodded his head. He did not expect themselves to be targeted by some unknown viper just after finishing off the hindering fiends of the Wind Cloud Empire. I want to see what kind of individual dares to create trouble with me around. Little Martin smirked in a low voice as his eyes lowered a little. Tsukue retreated calmly and pulled up Su-Ru, who was fiddling with the roast meat. Under Su-Ru's puzzling gaze, Tsukue pulled her over to Lin Dong's side and whispered, "Don't let anyone near them." It was clear that Su-Ru was startled by Tsukue's sudden actions. However, she was smart enough to quickly understand that something was wrong from Sukue's facial expression. Soon after, she could not help but look at little Martin, who was leaning on a huge boulder. The latter had both his arms behind his head, eyes closed as if he was napping. On the empty plot of land in the forest, the bonfire burned fervently. Subtle sounds of firewood crackling were given off, becoming the only sound that could be heard in this quiet place. This silence continued for a period of time. The scarlet sunshine that poured through the trees gradually became fainter. As time passed, the scarlet sunshine became dimmer and dimmer. Eventually, the scarlet sunshine completely disappeared, leaving the entire core zone in darkness. Swoosh! When the last light disappeared, two dark flashes suddenly leapt out from the darkness where Lindong and Little Flame were seated and stabbed towards the back of their heads at an extreme speed. Buzz! As the dark flashes surged forward, a dark green light flashed across Suru's eyes, who had been waiting for enemies to appear all along. With a flick of her finger, two beams of green light shot out from her fingertips, completely crushing the two incoming dark flashes. Cowards, finally you have appeared. The sleeping little Martin suddenly opened his eyes at this moment, a sinister look appearing on his handsome face. His purplish black eyes swiftly shifted, locking onto a huge tree to his right. Show yourself now. Little Martin reached out his hand and violently grabbed the empty space ahead of him. Bang! As little Martin grabbed the empty space in front of him, the lofty huge tree immediately exploded, filling the sky with broken bits of wood. A mysterious black light shot out from within and landed on the ground. The black light wiggled before materializing into a black shadow. Hey, you are indeed the most unfathomable one out of the three. A gaze that was filled with boundless ghastliness shot out from the black shadow's eyes and locked onto little Martin's body. Little Martin sat on the huge boulder and slightly leaned his head to the side. He stared at the black shadow with his purplish black eyes and replied casually, "You're the one who has long been concealing himself since Wanxiang City, right? And yet, you don't dare to reveal yourself. However, now that we have entered the core zone, you are in a hurry to take action. It seems as if someone from the Wanxiang City is missing in this place. Let me guess. That person should be the overseer of the Wanxiang City, Song Tai." The black shadow did not answer. Instead, his increasingly dark gaze seemed to reveal something. "You're worried that Song Tai might be able to discover something, and at the same time, you hate us so deeply. Hence, I can guess that you are one of those cowards hiding in the dark while plotting against this domain. Looks like you guys really have no intentions of letting us off," little Martin chuckled. The cunningness that could cause headache even for Lindong had surfaced again. "Tell me your name." "Grandpa Martin has no interest in nameless coward," little Martin nonchalantly said. "All of you know something that you should not know. Therefore, you must die. As for my name, you can call me." The black shadow wiggled as a sinister voice that was filled with scalp-numbing murder stealthily resounded throughout the forest. "Death Spirit General. This video will end here.